Okay. Yeah.
Me forward. I'm with the Blount Partnership, and I welcome you this morning. We're in for a treat. Don Bruce, who's going to talk to us about what's going on in Blount County and the region and the states in terms of economics. He has promised a song and dance for us this morning, so I think we'll enjoy watching that. Just a couple of housekeeping things is throughout the presentation, if you have a question that needs you need something clarified, if you would just type it in chat. So I'm going to ask you to mute and just type your question in chat. But at the end, we've left time for you to ask very specific questions where you can unmute. And so make sure you ask a bunch of questions because we want to make sure that we keep Don on his toes. And we also are recording this morning. So after the session, we'll massage it and put it together just right. And we will be sending it out to all our VIPs. I do want to turn it over now to my friend, Stephen Duker. Stephen is on our board of directors. He is our VIP chair and he's with Cirrus. And Stephen, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I've actually been looking forward to this session and actually listening to our speaker today. What I'm going to ask, though, I'm going to introduce him in just one moment, but I'm going to ask you to play along with me for just a moment. And I want everybody that can to turn on their video, turn on your camera. I was talking to Tammy Ford this morning. She would much rather us all being together, having a Bloody Mary or a mimosa in our hand right now in a little group setting. And I could feel it that she was just missing something. So I want everybody to turn their camera on and wave at Tammy Ford this morning. All right, everybody wave. Hey, and if you got that Brady Bunch thing going on, wave up and down and wave to all your neighbors as well, because a lot of us haven't seen each other in a while. If you see Don Bruce, he's our speaker today, wave to him and give him a warm welcome. But anyway, thank you so much for being here today. I won't make you keep your cameras on the whole time if you don't want, but I know this is going to be a speaker that you're going to want to listen to and not be doing emails. So if you want to keep it on, that's great. As I said, today's speaker, you know, I feel very fortunate that he's with us today. He's very humble. He says, you know, first and foremost, he's an economist. But I'll tell you, he is an economist that speaks lectures all over the world. He's actually an expert at what he does. And if you look at all the accolades about him and his honors and stuff, you'll be equally impressed. His day job is at the University of Tennessee. He's an economist there. He's a professor. He's a lecturer. He's a researcher. He's part of the very esteemed Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research. And even to that same extent, I'm impressed by the fact that he lives right here in Blount County. He's a 20+ year resident here. He's also a chamber member, and I know many of you know him. He's got this side hustle, I'll call it, where he's also chairman of the board of the Clayton Bradley Academy here. And for those that might not know, it's a pre-K through 12 STEM academy, creating leaders for our community in the future, which I think is just awesome that he's involved with our community that way. Today, he said he's going to talk about the kind of look at Blount County from an economic or macro standpoint. But he also says that all your questions, nothing's off the table. He's happy to talk about the state. He's happy to talk about the nation, the world, politics. He's happy to talk about NCAA and SEC if you want to, because that's part of his pedigree as well. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our speaker today, Don Bruce.
Thank you, Stephen. That was very kind words and not short
very sweet, but not short. So you followed part of my instructions, but I do appreciate you very much. And let me just start off by saying I do appreciate my colleague Matt Murray very much as well. You're used to seeing Matt. He's also a longtime Blount Countyan, but Matt Murray is one of the smartest people I've ever known. Ask me why I feel that way, because 21 years ago he hired me, so that must make him really smart. But Matt Murray is why I live in Blount County. I mean, he and I met actually a couple of years before I came to UT and established a friendship that remains to this day. And a bit of disclosure, we're really disappointed. Matt retired from the Boyd Center here just a couple of months ago, and I am actually sitting at his desk, and I'm still not ready for that. I'm still not used to that. Very, very big shoes to fill. I am excited that Matt is still in Blount County and continues to be a presence with the Chamber Partnership and the Industrial Development Board and all of the things that really matter. And anything I can claim success over, I owe at least a fairly significant debt of gratitude to Matt Murray. Now, he asked me to step in and do this talk for you all this morning. And full disclosure, he didn't tell me Tammy Ford had anything to do with it before I said yes. So Tammy, here I am. Love you anyway, but it's a real pleasure to be here. The Boyd Center at UT has been around since 1937. We feel very strongly that we have an obligation and responsibility, and we're proud of that responsibility to be of service to the public. And that's really important for us to continue to do these kinds of presentations, not only because we feel like we're delivering the wisdom, but we really view these as learning opportunities. I'm looking at this grid now. I see 25 people. I'm going to maybe relax the rules a little bit, Stephen, on the fly. There's only, it's a very manageable group here today. And I would encourage you to just unmute and interrupt with questions and comments. This is your time. I want to be useful to you. If you see that I'm flying through something that you want to spend a little bit more time on, just slow me down. It's going to be fast and furious otherwise, so we'll get right to it. And what we're going to do is just really look at the national economic picture first, put things in perspective. Drill down to the state level. We are one of the official economic forecasters for the state of Tennessee. We did just release our economic report to the governor, and we have some forecast information from that to share with you. And then I'm going to, as much as I can, I'm going to drill down to the local level and show some fairly recent, some fresh economic data for Blount County, and hopefully make this worthwhile. We'll talk about labor markets and housing markets and overall economic activity. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, get to the slides here, because you can't give an economics talk without a deck. So we'll go ahead and do that. Thumbs up from Tammy if you can see everything okay there. Yeah, or anybody else good. I can only see a few of you, so I was calling on one that I could see. So anyway, you've heard all of this. I'm going to start with what I view to be the absolute most important economic indicator today. And I'm going to put it up there, and somebody unmute and tell me what it is. Nobody has an idea?
COVID cases.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's our national caseload count. So CDC data on COVID cases. There is absolutely no more important economic indicator right now in terms of getting a handle on where our local, state, and national economies are going to go in the near future. Until we get this thing under control, we are still holding our breath a little bit. That being said, I think things are really great in Blount County. We are in a very special place in all sorts of ways in Blount County. You all know that. You're all responsible for it. And, I applaud the local efforts to do the right thing and keep things under control and, manage this very delicate balance between pandemic and public health issues and keeping our economy going. Not only have we managed our caseload, I think, fairly well in Blount County, I think we've managed to do really, really well economically. And that's something we can all take some pride in. We're not out of the woods, not by any stretch. This is a very dangerous disease. It continues to affect everything that we do. The second most important economic indicator I can show you is this one. It's a little harder. Anybody have an idea what that one is? If y'all thought you were going to just log in and mute and close the video and just, get your day jobs done. No, I'm going to be quizzing you. So
The unemployment.
thank goodness that is not unemployment.
Dr.
Good.
Mercer?
Somebody else was unmuted. Who else has an idea what that one is? So you get a hint down there at the bottom center of the screen, CDC report. This one is vaccinations. This is something we can actually do personally to increase economic activity broadly. The more of us go through this exercise, the more of us get in line when our slot is opened and get these vaccines, the faster we're going to be back to some sense of normal. We are not there yet. We are not going to be there soon, but let me tell you, it's exciting to see the developments with vaccine availability and approval. I am personally not throwing away my shot. Hope you won't either when the opportunity arises. This is very serious business, and the more people we have getting their vaccines as soon as possible, the faster we're going to be back into, able to do the things that we missed, like congregating, like coming to chamber events with more than, 20 people in the room and maybe even less than 6 feet of separation. We all look forward to that. So just a quick overview of where we are with the national economic picture. I'll get through this fairly quickly. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic really put the brakes on what was the absolute longest economic expansion in modern times. Real GDP, my goodness, surged by a third in the third quarter of 2020, which was great because we shrank by over 31% in the quarter prior to that. And you'll see a picture of that in just a second. We're still down about 10 million jobs relative to February 2020, just before the pandemic. This is national data, obviously, down 10 million jobs still. Unemployment rate is still much higher than we'd like it to be. I don't know if that was a comment or a question there. I'm just pausing for a second. Okay, it's half of what it was in May 2020 when it shot up to 13.3% nationally, and still trending down, but a little bit more slowly. So still very much experiencing the realities of the pandemic on the national level. The GDP growth, gross domestic product, the total dollar value of goods and services produced in the economy at a point in time. Growth rate in GDP is kind of the actual most important economic indicator. I call it the EKG, but only until 2020 did it actually look like an EKG. Dramatic short-term interruption in gross domestic product. We shut down for a quarter and then almost immediately made it back up. And that's been remarkable. And it's important to think about that, compare that to the Great Recession, which we felt was so devastating. I mean, that looks like a minor blip compared to what we saw last year in gross domestic product. Short-term interruption, though, because you see it immediately, it was erased. Tennessee, things have been, let's just say, challenging, but a lot better than we thought they would be. When the pandemic hit last spring, Matt and I and Bill Fox and Larry Kessler, several of our folks were actively engaged with state policymakers trying to figure out what was going to happen over the next 5, 6, 7, 8 months. We thought this was going to be a deep and somewhat prolonged recession. But that being said, the story hasn't played out quite as badly as we had thought. Personal income actually, it was up 2.5% in 2019, not bad, but sharp declines in 2020 quarter three, 10%. Employment was growing quite well, 2% in 2019, and then we had a sharp decline in early 2020 before slightly rebounding. I'll show you some better data on this coming up. Unemployment rate, I mean, we had record lows, 3.4% back in late 2019, up above 12% early 2020, falling back to 8.2%, and I've got some more recent data coming up. And the most important story from our perspective was the revenue pothole we thought we were going to have just never materialized. People just diverted their spending in ways that allowed state revenue to continue to come in, and we didn't have to have the same kinds of across-the-board spending cuts that we saw with the Great Recession. So turning to the forecast, I have to tip the hat to Matt Murray, who I think owns this costume and has used it for chamber functions in the past. I promised him I would never, ever repeat that, but it doesn't mean I can't show the cartoon, especially with the old school projector and laptop. I should have marked out Wayne and put Matt, and maybe I'll do that for the next one. But looking at the forecast, and this is fresh, this is just really recent from our national partner, the IHS Market Group, who is probably the preeminent macroeconomic forecaster on the planet right now. The forecast, as I'll show you, continued success, real GDP growth in returning to trend levels, fairly quickly, continued low interest rates, reducing unemployment rates. They're putting about a 50% probability on that, with a 25% probability that will be even better, with a faster rate of growth. And the two most important things with this forecast coming to fruition, first and foremost, action with the pandemic, vaccine rollout, people getting vaccinated, things opening back up, tourism, travel, events, the things that you all love to be involved with. The faster we can get that going, the more likely this is going to play out. If we have a return of the virus here in the spring, if enough people opt out of the vaccines and we have a spike up in caseloads and have to come back in and shut things down and really slow down the economy, we could end up with a slower rate of growth here, and that's the 25% probability. So 3-to-1 odds that we're going to see continued growth, and 1/3 of that is even faster growth, but 1 in 4 chance that we're going to have a long slog of this as we continue to come through. And we'll be watching the virus, and we'll be watching behavioral responses to all of this stuff as our key risk indicators here in the next couple of weeks. I think we're going to know a lot more in 2 to 3 weeks. I really do. Certainly by the end of March, we're going to have a really good sense of what the summer's going to look like. I keep thinking of Jaws. If you're old like me, you've seen this movie about a shark that invades a tourist town, and we have to shut down the beaches, and everybody's worried. It's a classic trade-off, right? You've got a health concern and an economic concern, and the local leadership wanted the economics to win the day, so let's open the beaches. And then you got Richard Dreyfuss, was that the guy? Basically saying, we've got to close this beach now or people are going to die. And it's this is Jaws. This is COVID-19, Jaws COVID-19 edition. And I really feel like the extent to which we can manage this balance very carefully and prudently this next month will tell us a lot about whether we can open the beaches in the summertime. I think some places are going to open the beaches anyway, and I'm a little nervous about that activity, not in Tennessee, but in other places. So I'm going to turn now to a relatively new service that we've been doing here in the Boyd Center in partnership with the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration, and that is our weekly economic and fiscal indicators series. If you haven't discovered this and you're into this kind of thing, I would encourage you to look for this. You can Google it, or I think I've got a link at the end of the slideshow here where you can go and find this. We update it every week, and this allows a very quick and concise drill down to local level economic situations. So let me just quickly page through these. I'll skip a couple of them, but I've got the whole thing queued up. Job market. So the big story of the COVID-19 pandemic economy was a sudden and sharp interruption in employment activity. Huge increase in unemployment rates in a matter of a week. We went from record lows below 4% at the state and national level to record highs above 14% for both Tennessee and US data. Those have come down almost as quickly, but they remain significantly above the 2018-2019 experience that we had. Our hope is that we'll come back down closer to 4% here through the rest of the year, but I think that's, at this point, is just a hope. We've got a lot of work to do to get to that point. Non-farm employment growth. So what's happening with job growth? Obviously, we were ticking along at 2%, which is a pretty steady state, nice equilibrium rate of growth in employment for 10 years. And then all of a sudden, boom, COVID-19 pandemic shut down, where our job growth rates are in the double digits negative. quickly reversing, but again, even still significantly negative rates of employment growth at the state and national level. Fortunately, Blount County, as I'll show you, is pacing the state here. It's amazing how strong Blount County employment has been really throughout the pandemic, but certainly the most recent recovery. Unemployment insurance was the first and most significant response publicly to this pandemic economy. And the idea here was get additional cash into the pockets of people who had been displaced or lost their source of income as a result of the virus. And so the federal government comes in, adds a bunch of money to the unemployment insurance benefit checks, and you have this huge spike up in unemployment claims in the state. Well over 100,000 claims in that first week, tapering off in terms of initial claims, tapering off fairly quickly, still high. So the labor market story is fairly consistent here. It's important to get a sense of which industries are most heavily impacted. I promise not to do a lot of pie charts, especially ones that are hard to read, but this just gives you a sense of the most recent initial unemployment insurance claims. So this is not necessarily initial COVID impact. This is last week. This is, February 20th, 2021. Those are very broadly distributed across the economy. We don't have one sector driving the current labor market frictions. You see manufacturing carrying 19% of those initial claims, but every sector has been impacted, very broadly distributed. And now what you see here are the distribution of the ongoing claims, including the ones who might have signed up, last fall, who are still receiving unemployment insurance. And so this gives you a sense of the sectors that are experiencing the longest term negative impacts on employment. And professional and business services and leisure and hospitality, no surprise. Those industries have been deeply negatively impacted by this pandemic. Trade, 15% of the continuing claims, manufacturing only 12%. So it's a little bit more fits and starts with manufacturing. Some sectors have done quite well as they've retooled towards the pandemic economy. Other sectors not doing very well at all. But very broadly distributed for sure. Just time series here for Tennessee. The initial claims spiked up, as you see, in March 2020. Continued claims. You go on unemployment insurance, you can stay on there for several weeks. It takes some time for people to come back off of those rolls, either because they reach a time limit or because they find employment or return to their pre-existing job. The point I want to raise about this graph is our ongoing claims or continued claims are still about twice what they were before the pandemic. This huge bubble is mostly gone, but there are still 2 times as many people on unemployment insurance as there were in February 2020. The initial claims seem to have come back down, but we're nowhere near the pre-existing trend of very few cases coming on per week, almost 0 per week. And now we're, a few thousand. So how does it look at the local level? Let's get to some Blount County data. UI claims as a share of the labor force. The initial claims last week were only about 0.16% of the labor force in Blount County. I don't know if you can see those. I think I can zoom in a little. Oh, wrong button. Let's see. I'm not able to do it on here for some reason. Maybe because it's PDF. Well, I'll make these available so you can zoom in on your free time later on. Continued claims as a share of labor force, 1.2% in Blount County. And what's important to recognize that East Tennessee, as is usually the case, doing a little bit better than the statewide totals. Blount County is no different really from its surrounding neighbors. Fairly low percentages compared to a lot of other areas. Now you look at Sevier County next door, quite a different story. You think Sevier County is not paying attention to the March numbers. They're really interested in how things are going to go this summer. In Blount County, our economy, we have quite a bit of tourism related economics going on in Blount County, but there's a much more diversified set of activities going on. Total claims since March 21st, 2020. as a percent of the workforce. And so you get in East Tennessee, 28.5% of our workforce had received unemployment insurance benefits at some point since last March, in the last year. Think about that. More than 1 in 4 workers in East Tennessee. That being said, the Memphis area saw 40% of their workforce end up on unemployment insurance. All things considered, not so bad in East Tennessee, given that the sharp decline that we saw due to the pandemic. I'm going to skip over a couple here and get to the unemployment rate. So right now, Blount County is sitting on a 5.5% unemployment rate as of the end of January. We should have updated information, maybe even later today, for a February rate. They're not moving quickly, but once again, East Tennessee and especially the counties surrounding Blount, I think, are seeing a lower than statewide average unemployment rate situation. The percentage point change December 19 to December 20, Blount County's unemployment rate really only went up on net 2.6 percentage points. You see much higher impacts in the darker blue counties on that bottom map, much larger increases in unemployment rates. So all things considered, yeah, we're at 5.5. We'd love to be at 4.5 or 3.5, but we're doing a lot better than a lot of the state, for sure, in terms of our unemployment rate picture. Employment growth rates, 1 year change as of December, we're at 0.8 positive. So a little less than 1% employment growth rate in Blount County. That's pretty remarkable given that 12-month period. You look at Sevier, down 5%. You look at DeKalb, 3.5%, Giles, 3.4%. Almost every place is negative. The blue counties are all negative. Look at that East Tennessee stability right there. Lots of positives, not very large, but to have positive job growth in the 1 year change from December to December is pretty darn remarkable. I don't need to get into the regional impacts. East Tennessee is leading the state there. You can go and see these at your leisure, but and you've just seen these data in a map format. So I'm just putting these on here to compare them to the statewide totals. So Tennessee, statewide 3.1 in December 19, 6.2 in December 2020. Blount County below across the board, 2.9 and 5.5. So much stronger labor market, much stronger labor force attachment here in Blount County. No surprise to this audience at all. Employment is up 0.8% over the year. You saw that on the map. Only a few counties here are in green. Most of the counties have experienced a negative jobs impact, and statewide down 1%. So we're, twice as fast as the statewide total. What's going on here? It's all Tammy's fault, right? Keep saying all these great things, and you all are creating a place that people want to live and do business. And that's a point of pride for Blount County. It really is. We're going to see some interesting impacts from that here in just a second. But taxes, let's switch to taxes for a minute, because that's what I do for most of my work here. We are a tax revenue shop for the most part. We were projecting long and protracted declines in statewide total tax collection. We did have a sharp negative in the early months of the pandemic, more than offset in the next quarter. And tax revenue growth is kind of ticking along right where it was before. It's rather remarkable. And I think there's a couple of things to say about that. First of all, we're a sales tax state, right? 2/3 of our revenues come from sales taxes, and the rest is pretty broadly distributed across lots of different revenue sources. So we have the benefit of a primary source that does pretty well in recessions, and people just changed how they were spending their money. They didn't spend less. And then we also had fiscal stimulus from the federal government that propped this up as well. And the other side is we have a really diversified revenue portfolio, such that one struggle here could be offset by a really good performance over there. And so sales taxes being really important to Tennessee. Yes, we did have a very large spike downward when everything shut down for a couple of months last spring, but we quickly bounced back from that. And to me, the most interesting story from the pandemic is the way in which sales taxes came in. and maybe you all are paying attention to this, but it's certainly been on our minds. The local sales taxes are really important. And I know a big part of the chamber partnership is promoting local enterprise and convincing people to shop local. And we saw a lot of activity in that area. There is a question, certainly in my household now, shopping local is awesome. Does that now include Amazon in Blount County? Can we call that shopping local now that we're going to have a pretty major local establishment employing local people? Just a little interesting. My wife was particularly excited that she could do all of her shopping online and still be local. But that's important to recognize, because what happened in early 2020 is lots of things shut down. We couldn't go to the stores, we couldn't go at certain times, but people still needed stuff. So everybody went on their computers and started buying online. And you have this huge growth in internet commerce. And fortunately, a year and a half before the pandemic hit, the Supreme Court ruled that states can actually enforce the collection and remission of sales taxes on online purchases, as long as the business is above a certain size threshold when it comes to the number of sales into a particular state. This was the Wayfair decision at the Supreme Court, and we've been actively engaged in that line of research here in the Boyd Center for 20 years. And it's just great fortune that this happened, because Tennessee has a lot of customers who shop online, and you have sales taxes now that are moving away from in-person storefronts to online storefronts, but the sales taxes are still coming in. And what's really important is they're coming in to the areas where the shoppers live. And that's really important to think about. So if I look at the local option sales tax revenue growth by county over the last 12 months, look at those rates of growth. Blount County up 21.3% in local option sales tax. How is that happening in a pandemic? It's happening because of online sales taxes that are based on where people live. So if I used to shop in Knoxville, here where I work every day, and go home in the evening to my home in Walland, Knox County gets my sales tax because I bought the thing in person. But now if I'm working at home and buying from home, the sales tax is being allocated to Blount County. That's really, really important I think it's less important for Blount County than it is for some of the more rural areas that have absolutely no retail base to speak of. You look at Hawkins County up 33%, Stewart County 35.9%. I mean, some of these places haven't seen growth rates in sales taxes like that ever. And it's simply because of the pandemic shifting purchases online. Fiscal year to date, Blount County is up 15.5% in that bottom graph. But you look at Davidson, down 5%. Davidson's not seen negative growth in local option sales tax because they're a retail hub. Everybody comes into Nashville to shop and dine and spend money, not in the pandemic. And so that money is being kind of reallocated out to the more outlying areas. I think Blount County has been really well positioned there to preserve a local retail base while also recapturing some of the lost sales tax revenue that was going to other jurisdictions due to in-person shopping in our neighboring counties. Knox County is only about half the rate of growth in local option sales taxes during the last 12 months. Remarkable story out of the pandemic as far as I'm concerned. This just gives you the numbers from that table, so I'm going to skip through these and get to real estate for just a minute, and then wind it up and get some time for Q&A. So real estate, obviously a big part of the local economy, and I just have to pause for a moment. I see my friend Mike Herron on this call, and I'm just delighted that he is here. And let me just say that anything I don't know about the local economy or the local real estate market, Mike Herron will have the right answer, and I'll look forward to him maybe chiming in at the Q&A, so I'll put him on the spot if he's still on. Anyway, we don't have a lot statewide to track except some tax collections for realty transfer and realty mortgage revenues. And what you see here, a little bit of a blip downward in the realty transfer, and that things slowed down a little bit, but housing has just been ridiculous in the last six to 9 months. Everybody's nesting, everybody's going home and realizing they want something different. And Lots of people are moving out of cities and trying to figure out where they can work from home or get a second place in the mountains or what. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on that have just translated into a phenomenal real estate market, and certainly in Blount County. So I went to my favorite, my second favorite, the Knoxville Area Association of Realtors, of which Blount County has a chamber, is a really great source of information, but I wanted something quick. And so I went to Zillow, like so many people do. And Zillow has a home value index that is essentially, it's much better now than it was a few years ago. It used to be a median house value. Now it's more of it tries to capture the entire housing market, whether it's for sale or not, what's happening to house values over time. And the typical house in Blount County is over $233,000 right now. And more remarkably, and that was certainly not the case even 5 years ago. More remarkably, look at that in the last 5 years. And this is the same methodology to calculate these over time. It's $100,000 increase in typical home wealth in 5 years. So if you have extra cash, buy all the houses that are for sale. And that being said, you're supposed to have bought those in 2013 and now sell them and make lots of money. But anyway, there are two sides to this coin, right? With any price increase, there are two sides. Those who are selling are making out. There's huge wealth effects that happen from this. On the other side of that coin, anybody trying to buy a house is going to have to spend a lot more money. And it's actually a barrier to location. So it's something to keep track of. If we're attracting a lot of workers and we don't have any place for them to live, we have to really be concerned about that. And this group is uniquely qualified to be thinking about those big picture issues. So just to wrap up, here's the forecast. National forecast for starters, we're expecting really, really good GDP growth at the national level this year. This is based on an expected rollout of vaccines, an expected reopening of the economy, a return to travel, a return to events and conventions, driven by strong consumption and investment growth, and of course, strong international trade. Federal funds rate will continue to remain very, very low for the foreseeable future. We don't see it coming up really within this forecast window at all. Mortgage rates will continue to be low, and even 3.5 in 2022 is low historically. Low inflation, just remarkable, sticking around 2%. With that kind of GDP growth, to have inflation at only 2% is remarkable. Unemployment rates slowly coming back down to that 4% we were hoping to continue to have before the pandemic hit. And then finally, job growth solid at 2% this year, doubling almost a year later. So all things considered, that's a pretty rosy national economic picture. I will say this, we recognize that there are components of our economy, including our local economy, that are indeed struggling mightily right now. So while the top line aggregates look really good, you don't have to look far to see people that you know, people in your family who still don't have work because their sectors have been completely shut down. So let's not be completely lulled to sleep by the aggregates. Turning briefly to the statewide, this is a slightly outdated forecast from the end of 2020. We only do these Tennessee forecasts about twice a year. We haven't redone this one yet, but all things considered, pretty solid GDP growth. I expect that'll be higher when we redo the forecast. Personal income growth should be positive in 2021 when we redo that forecast. Unemployment rate is probably pretty accurate there, and job growth hovering around 2%. So not really much of a different story for Tennessee in the near-term future. So this is as close as we're getting to a song and dance, Tammy. I'm sorry. I'm in my office, so I have to exercise some decorum as I serve the people here, but I kind of like this one. This is a Murray-esque Dilbert. All right, that's right on my target time. I do have one more slide that I'll punch to a little bit later, or just show you quickly and come back. Just our contact information. Follow us on social media at UT Boyd Center, dbruce@utk.edu. Feel free to reach out anytime. And I'm happy to stick around now and just talk about what you all want to talk about. So let me just go ahead and stop the share. And y'all have at it.
Questions?
Some chat activity.
Mike Swift?
Do you think the unemployment insurance extension is having a negative impact on employment?
You know, that's a fair question, because we always wonder, if you pay people not to work, won't they decide not to work? I was very deeply concerned about that early on when I saw the numbers in terms of the benefit levels. I thought this makes sense, but then I realized the UI changes in early 2020 were as much a public health measure as they were an employment interruption protection measure. In other words, it made sense for us to pay people to stay home for a while. It really did, in order to slow the early stages of the pandemic. That being said, we probably should have done it in October at the same aggressive levels, because we had our biggest spike around Thanksgiving. So that's one that's really hard to predict in advance. What's the tipping point? What's the level at which you get people to stay home and really take care of each other in a way that we're not used to doing? That being said, I think that with the resurgence in employment that has happened, I don't feel strongly at all that the people who were eligible for and were available to claim unemployment insurance, they had lost their jobs, by the way, in order to get that. I don't think the recent numbers would suggest that caused a long-term negative impact on the labor market. My sense of the current situation is those lingering, 10 million down is really driven by the sectors that have been much more deeply impacted. Outside of tourism, events, travel, outside of those sectors, and restaurants and bars have managed to continue a business operation with fewer people. Those are sectors that are still struggling to get out of this hole. And I don't think we can blame unemployment insurance for that. I think we have other things to blame for that. So I'm not as worried as I might have been back in March.
Don, I'll throw one out if y'all don't mind. What about the self-employed unemployment that's a new thing? Is there any kind of statistics relative to the amount that's impacted and just total dollars? Because that was a new deal.
Yeah, I love that question, Bruce. Thank you. That's an area where I've spent quite a bit of time thinking, because what we saw in early 2020 was an unprecedented explosion of new firm formation. Unbelievable spike upward. And I'll draw your attention to our website. We've got a white paper on that very topic, looking at this explosion in new firm registrations. And most of those are non-employer sole proprietorships. They're not all small business self-employed, but quite a few of them are. And, and the temptation is to say, well, everybody went home and started sewing masks and selling them on Etsy, and now they've got an EIN, employer identification number, for tax purposes. But there's a lot more to it than that. These are businesses that have actually gone to the point of registering with the Secretary of State to do business. And a lot of new self-employed sole proprietors don't know they need to do that kind of stuff. In fact, there are a lot of businesses in existence right now that still don't know they need to do that stuff. And it's really hard to track that down. But unbelievable spike upward in that type of activity. Now, that being said, we don't know a lot about the dollar values just yet. I do think they have contributed significantly to the smoothing out of that deep V recession that we experienced last year, because these were not just side gigs; these were primary gigs that people went out and figured out there's money to be made in this economy. Let's go find it and let's go make it. And you see that especially around here. I mean, this is an entrepreneurial culture. This is a population and a demographic that doesn't wait for somebody else to come in and, you know, we got the stimulus checks, you know, in this area. We were not excluded from that. And I think that had a lot to do with people starting up businesses. You get a sudden influx of capital, you can get over that hump and start that business. You might have lost your job at the same time. You've got to continue to pay the bills. So lots of interesting things to be looking at. I think the data as we follow through 2021, we'll have a lot better picture about the scale of those activities. But it's been great to see that resurgence in cottage industry entrepreneurship. That kind of, you know, I think of it sort of as part of the American dream. Here you live in a place where we can do that. You just see a niche, you see a hole that needs to be filled, hang out a shingle and go fill it. Mike Herron will talk to you about all the startup financing that you need. For the small business protection loans and so on that have been made available also to help existing businesses stay in operation have been phenomenal. I think we see high profile cases of abuse of that program. But if you get into the data, the granularity will show you by and large that the people getting those loans were you know, on the verge of bankruptcy in a lot of cases, and we're able to survive and continue to employ people and continue to inject funds into our local economy. And that income to those workers becomes spending everywhere else. Just tremendously important things, but I like that topic.
Hey, Don, this is Stephen. You know, you had the slide up with Shop Local and Amazon, and you got those jobs coming in off, which made me think, you know, there's the debate about the $15 an hour minimum wage going on right now. And I know Amazon came out and said, yeah, we're paying 15 plus an hour starting. And you heard that about Costco this week, where there's one-upping them and they're going to be 16 and, you know, that sort of thing. I'm just curious from your vantage, you know, there's a lot of debate both ways. I'm just wondering, you know, we have a lot of small businesses here, a lot of companies that might hire a part-time high school kid to do something in the afternoon and that sort of thing. What do you think the impacts are on the small business in our area if and when that goes through?
Yeah, that's, I mean, huge landmine. And I told Stephen when we talked earlier this week, I'm an equal opportunity offender when it comes to delicate political issues. You know, people usually have a hard time pinning me down because I make everybody mad all the time. Minimum wage is something I've felt pretty strongly about for a long time. And I'm going to try to give more of an academic answer to this because it is fraught with uncertainty, to be sure, because the business community is so very heterogeneous on this regard. For a lot of our businesses, a $15 minimum wage would be like a non-event because they're already paying everybody more than that. For a lot of our other businesses, everybody they employ makes less than that. So we're talking about a huge immediate increase in payroll expenditures if they don't do anything else, if nothing else changes. And so the notion of going from $7 and a quarter to $15 all at once, to me, is sort of like, whoa, we just don't do that. We don't have a history of that. And so you step back and you think about, what's the goal? What's the goal here? The goal is to make sure that people can make a living. People who are hardworking and paying taxes can actually pay their bills. And to me, the heart of it is a social justice argument. You want to take care of the least of these, right? So we need to make sure that struggling families are able to pay their bills, like stimulus checks and payroll protection loans and all the things that we do. And an economist's answer is there are lots of ways to achieve that goal. And we have lots of irons in that fire, to include unemployment insurance, food stamps, TANF cash welfare, TennCare, earned income tax credit, one of my favorites, lots of tax credits, low tax rates for low incomes. Our income tax system is set up to provide this vehicle for redistribution within the population. The notion that this is a social problem that should only be solved by employers of minimum wage workers is a little bit odd for me to wrap my head around. I think this is a broadly distributed social issue that requires a broadly distributed burden to solve it. Why? Because a minimum wage requirement is exactly the same economically in my mind as a corporate income tax or a business income tax, in that It's only coming out of the business owner's pockets or out of profits as a last resort. If you're employing workers and all of a sudden you have to pay them more, you're going to look everywhere you can to try to shift that burden somewhere, just like with a tax increase. First thing you're going to try to do is raise your prices. If you can, if you're in a less competitive industry where you can do that, you might raise your prices, and people will tell you, the advocates for a minimum wage increase will tell you, I'm happy to pay a higher price. Let's see if that is actually true. If the marketplace allows that price to float upward, then we're fine. So all the fast food, all the sectors where we employ a lot of minimum wage workers are going to see a price increase on the order of 100% because it's a 100% increase in minimum wage. I don't know that everybody's lining up for that just now. So the marketplace will resist that price increase a little bit. So then we're going to have to turn inside and look at our suppliers. Where can we save money inside the operation? Can we negotiate lower prices for our inputs? Can we get a better deal for our loanable funds? Can we lay off some workers? Can we give lower payroll increases to those making more than the minimum wage? We've got to figure out how to cover this burden somewhere. And then finally, as a last resort, we take it out of profits, right? And if you're a publicly traded corporation, that's going to impact anybody with a share of your stock in their retirement account. So my view of minimum wage is it's a symbol. It's a very important and powerful symbol. It's a meaningful symbol to those making minimum wage, and an increase would be a very welcome change for that group. But as a society, I think we're obligated to stand back and ask the question, is this really the best way to solve that problem? And if it is, are we prepared for a price increase, slower job growth, or even negative job growth, lower returns to retirement savings, all of these things that we expect would happen in response to a huge increase in minimum wage like that? Now, I don't want to talk down about our newest Blount County resident, Amazon, but as an economist, it's a perfectly legitimate position to take if you're already paying everyone greater than the minimum wage that's proposed, that everybody else should too, right? That's the classic capitalist response to that. If I'm paying all these people more than $15 an hour and my competition is not, then I want this requirement to be in place because then I'll be even better. It might hurt them more than it'll hurt me. I don't think that's where Amazon is coming from. I honestly believe Amazon is proud of the fact that they take care of their workers in terms of the hourly wage. But in theory, it's a reasonable position to take if you're in a competitive capitalist economy, which we are. And you see that all over the place. It's not just Amazon. Anybody paying more than $15 an hour doesn't object to this. It doesn't hurt them. Long-winded answer, Stephen. I don't know if I actually got to your specific question there, but you all got my sermon on the minimum wage anyway.
Hey, Don, Chris Hurley's had his hand up for a while.
Okay.
Chris Hurley, do you have a question?
Well, I did, and I don't know how to put my hand down on here. I'm sorry. Bruce asked my question, and I'm good. Thanks.
Okay.
I thought that was part of his logo. It looks like
Mike Karen, do you have anything?
I sure do. And Don, thank you so much for presenting this morning. It's so interesting to me, and I appreciate all the work that you do in this regard. You touched on something there with the minimum wage, possible price increases coming from that. Also, too, I wonder about inflation. Of course, price increases, of course, is results in inflation. But also, too, I've heard other people talk about the stimulus package that's on the table right now. Some folks say we don't need it, and perhaps it would overstimulate and maybe cause inflation in and of itself. Do you think that that's a possibility? I know in your presentation you said you thought inflation was pretty much in check, and it has been. But do you think there is a possibility with a possible minimum wage increase and the overstimulation from the packages that are on the table now that we would see inflation raise its head once again?
Yeah, I mean, I love the economics behind that question. And Mike Heron, let me just say, for the benefit of the public here, Mike Heron is Blount County for me. He is best in the business, such a true gentleman and a human being, and I'm just honored to be associated with you, sir. So I appreciate your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's just, I'm going to try to say this in a way that doesn't sound like I'm insulting you, okay? And I'm not trying to insult you. I call you a friend for a reason. There are a lot of people who need a stimulus check right now. A lot of people. We don't see them a lot where we live. We don't see them a lot where we work. And the point I make about stimulus payments, first of all, they're built into the forecast. This round of proposed stimulus that's in this current legislation, the $1.9 trillion package, minus the minimum wage, which will certainly be taken out if it hasn't already. Those are built into this macroeconomic forecast that gets us inflation around 2%. So no, I don't think we're going to see a broad impact of stimulus checks on inflation, because I do think the point of the stimulus checks is for them to be spent. Okay. It's not just income for low income people on the front end when the checks arrive. If that's all we cared about, we would just write stimulus checks to people under $50,000 of household income. The point of the stimulus checks is to generate flow of cash through the economy, which is why some people are arguing there shouldn't even be a cap on them. You know, if you haven't gotten a stimulus check, there are folks out there who think you should, because you're going to go and spend that money, and that spending is going to become income for somebody else, and so on and so on and so on. So it's this Keynesian multiplier thing, whether you believe it or not. But to the core question, the inflation risk of additional stimulus, I think, is really low, because I think that I think we have, again, we're probably closer to 0 or 1% inflation without the stimulus checks. So I think we're in that comfortable range where we can handle even another 0.5 percentage point. I do feel like the $15 minimum wage would give us a much bigger potential inflationary bump than an additional stimulus check. I just have that feeling, simply because those things will translate into retail prices much more quickly than the stimulus checks do. You know, in some sense, our stimulus spending was replacing foregone spending on things like travel and hospitality. So the total spending is basically what it was. You know, $15 minimum wage is permanent. It doesn't go away. I mean, it's going to be hard to get it in. It'll be even harder to get it out, to repeal that thing. You can't unwind it once it's in place. Well, I don't think it's going to pass anyway. It's definitely going to be pulled out because of the budget rules in the Senate. It won't be part of the stimulus bill. I don't see how they can do that.
Hey, Don, quick question whenever you finish up.
No, I'm ready.
This is Matthew Bryan. I'm just trying to get a feel for the greater economic factors that are going on here. I mean, we've got record-setting debt nationally. We've got home prices through the roof. You just told me that most Blount Countyans can't afford a new home in Blount County. Okay, $233,000. If you make 30, 40, 50 grand a year, you can't buy 230. You might be able to borrow and get a loan for, but you can't afford it. So the influx of people into our area, great. Amazon, great. We're all bragging about it, but guess what? It hurts. It hurts the local people here. If you're coming in here, you've got all the opportunity in the world. So there's that going on. Nobody predicted the downturn before, right? 08, 09, everybody's like, yeah, things are great. Everybody's good. Nobody predicted it. I'm predicting it now. There's too much debt. House prices are going through the roof. It's not going to take much, and people are going to try to figure out, you know, what's going on here. But there's also this demand behind this. People are ready to spend money. Savings rates 13% or something crazy right now, and people are going to spend all this money on travel and clothing and cars, whatever they're doing with it. What is going to happen? This is the strangest economy I cannot get my arms around it, but the houses are incredible. Like, I can't understand, like, who in the hell are buying these houses and cars. I want everybody to have a nice car, but I've never bought more than a $20,000 car in my life. And I don't know how people do $40,000, $50,000, and $60,000 cars. So I guess what's the shoe that's going to drop that makes this thing go, okay, we need to take a step back and breathe a little bit. What is, and I think we're isolated here in Blount County. I think we're in a great area. So whatever happens in the rest of the world, we're going to be in great shape, even if it does dip down. This is an incredible area. I don't think people know how isolated we are here, Knoxville, Blount. I mean, we're just in a great area.
Yes. So, I mean, there's about 100 questions wrapped up in there, Matthew. I really appreciate that.
That's my nature. I apologize.
No, I appreciate it, because that gives me the pulse of the local economy comes from your comments and questions. And I do appreciate that. You're hitting it right on. I'm going to pick one or two things to respond to there.
Sure. Thank you.
when you have house price appreciation the way we've seen it in Blount County, what's an economist going to tell you has to happen? There's got to be a supply side response. There's money to be made. And then it becomes important for the local planners, the governments, the chambers, everyone else to decide what's the healthy rate of growth. You're going to have an increase in housing supply at some point. Or you're at least going to have a really good highway to the place where it is a good housing supply. And we're working on both of those things right now. The 233, don't forget, is an indicator of the whole housing market. There are plenty of houses below that number and plenty of houses above that number. It's just that when you see that appreciation, it's actually being driven by appreciation across the board. I do worry about the extent to which we are pricing people out of the market and the extent to which we think that's okay and deliberate. I'm not necessarily going to weigh in on that. I think if we're going to create jobs for people, we ought to have a place for them to live. And I'm biased there. I'm in partnership with Clayton Homes. I mean, let's talk about a really great corporate partner in Blount County, in Clayton Bradley Academy. They're leading the charge here and making sure that the market doesn't run away in that sense. We are protected here, and that's the thing. The message has to be, there's a lot to be proud of for sure, but we have risks. We have things we always need to be looking at our local situation and asking the question, how can we be better tomorrow? What ought we to be focusing on now to make sure that we can grow sustainably? And you all are the group to figure that out. You don't need me to come in and tell you that one. What's the community want and how are we going to get there? And it's happening slowly but surely, and we'll get there eventually. But I do appreciate the question. I apologize, I can't get more into all the nuances, but let's have a phone call maybe later on and get into some more of that stuff. Recognizing the time, I should probably quit going on and on and on. Tammy's giving me a little nod there. So, but I will offer anybody to call or email anytime if you want to talk about any of this stuff. Happy to do it.
Thank you, Don, and thank you for all of the questions. One thing that came up in chat, Don, can we furnish your slide deck to all of the attendees today? And again, remind you, we will be pushing a recording out after we do a little bit of edits on the front end. Thank you. And you did well, Don. You surpassed Matt Murray, and I'll make sure to tell him, because that's just like some crazy information, but it's so vital to our area. And Blount County's lucky in that we're diverse. With even just our tourism industry, you've got the Maryville Alcoa properties and you have the Townsend Blackberry properties. And where during this pandemic, where the Alcoa Maryville was way down, the Townsend Walla market was way up. So we were able to balance. So we are very, very fortunate. I hope you will come back and do a briefing again, and maybe sometime later this year. So with that, thank you, Don. Thank you all. Happy Thursday. And Don, if you could just hold back a minute and let's wrap up, and y'all have a great day.